Hey friends, welcome back. Hello to you new people too. I'm Courtney, and this is probably not the video you were expecting. Today I'm going to have a story time video with you, and I'm going to tell you about the death of my grandmother and what I've been going through for the past two and a half weeks. So this is a sad tale, and I'm just going to warn you up front that I'm just going to be speaking about my experiences and how I've been coping. So this is not a happy video. I'm sorry. It's not. I guess it was June 3rd. My dad called me and said that grandma had been found unresponsive in her assisted living facility and that she had a massive stroke and they didn't know what was going on, but I might need to fly to Indiana. So my dad called me on that Sunday and told me that, and I was a little freaked out, but I was like, maybe it's not going to be as bad as I think it is. And then Monday I was in the middle of work and he called me around 4 o'clock or so and said, you need to come home because grandma's not going to make it. And so I found the next flight that I could get from Tampa to Indianapolis for $1,000 and took that flight, which got me in around midnight Monday night. So my dad picked me up from the airport at midnight Monday night and took me home to his house. And then I guess Tuesday morning we got to the hospital between 6 and 7. I think around 7. So I think we were up at like 5:30 or 6 and then just went to the hospital. And that first day, because it really hadn't sank in, I was like, well, okay, we'll see what's going on, see how she is. I was prepared for everything to look worse than it did, because when you say somebody has a massive stroke, I usually think that that means that one side of their body is paralyzed. And my grandmother had a massive stroke, so the right side of her body was paralyzed, but her face was no longer paralyzed. So this actually, in retrospect, makes me think that if she didn't have congestive heart failure, that she could have potentially recovered from the stroke, but that's, you know, a whole other thing. When I got to the hospital, grandma, you know, opened her eyes. She could see me. She could not speak. She could not swallow. She had a forced air breathing thing on that they had to remove and just put like little oxygen into her nose, because she had very specific living will and DNR information. Basically, she didn't want any artificial nutrients. She didn't want artificial forced breathing air. She just wanted like bare minimum. She didn't want to be resuscitated. This has been the same way for at least the past 10 years, because she'd always told me that, you know, when she's ready to go, she's ready to go. She didn't want anything holding her back or stopping her from going to Jesus. And I totally respected that, and so did my dad. So when we got to the hospital, she had this mask on, and they ended up taking it off, and then she could at least, you know, look us in the eyes and communicate. She couldn't move her right arm, but she can move her left arm, and so she would cup my face and my dad's face. And we talked to her, told her we loved her. She knew we were there. She responded. She would squeeze our hand. When my dad asked her to lift her legs up, she would lift her legs up for the nurses. So on Tuesday when I got to see her, she was still her. She was still there. She hadn't gone yet. So I don't care that it cost me $1,000 to fly back to Indiana. It was priceless to be able to get back there to say goodbye to grandma. All kinds of our family came in to see her. And so my dad stayed the night at the hospital. Every single night except for the night that he picked me up that Monday night, he was at the hospital with her. She'd always said she didn't want to die alone. So Tuesday and Wednesday, We were all at the hospital basically from the time we got up until we went to bed. Wendy and I would go home to my dad's house and we would take care of the horses, take care of the cats and the dog, and then basically sleep for, I don't know, 3 to 5, maybe 6 hours, and then get up and come back to the hospital. Wednesday, I think it was, maybe around 2 a.m., Grandma stopped holding hands, stopped reaching out, and seemed to go unconscious. And I think it was Wednesday that we ended up having to put her on a morphine drip for pain. We'd put her on morphine shots, but they would wear off and then she would be in pain. And while she wasn't conscious, you could see her brow would furrow, her eyes would squeeze tight. She would clutch at her stomach and her legs like she was in pain. So the ICU nurses worked with us. We were at IU West, which is a great hospital in Indianapolis. The staff was excellent. At one point, I don't know, it was bizarre. They were saying that they didn't think that they could keep her where we were at in ICU, but I thought that if we moved her also it would kill her. Because they were like, well, you need to put her into hospice. Well, she ended up going into hospice while we were in the hospital, so it was a little bit weird and confusing, and it was frustrating because she had insurance and supplemental insurance specifically for that hospital because she'd been using that hospital chain for like 10 years. So it was weird that initially they tried to deny keeping her there, and then the doctors that were on staff and the nurses and the RN said, doesn't matter whether the insurance denies it or not, we're not going to move her because we think it'll kill her to move her. So like there was a lot of stuff going on there that I don't really remember all the details at, but I'm so grateful to the staff at IU West for being great patient advocates for my grandmother to not move her. It was kind of surreal and hard to be there because I love my family, but we don't agree about certain things. Like we don't have the same political views. And I was sitting there in the room with my grandmother, watching her die by inches, listening to my family go on and on about Hillary and her fucking emails. And I just kept my mouth shut and didn't say anything, and just, I felt like it was all so surreal and none of it really mattered. I had people messaging me on Instagram asking me to talk about the Kat Von D anti-vaxxer thing, and I just could not give a fuck about the drama. It was just out of my mind. It was insignificant compared to what I was going through, which, by the way, I'm all for vaccines. I think that being anti-vax is stupid, but I know people who can't get vaccines because of they're immunocompromised or other reasons. Like my grandmother, you know, was always at high risk. So yeah, I couldn't deal with any of the drama or bullshit pretty much anywhere online, so I just didn't. Thursday things seemed different with my grandmother, and I stayed the night at the hospital with my dad that night because I felt like Grandma was gonna go Thursday night or Friday morning. And so I sang to my grandma for, I don't know, an hour, maybe a little longer, but I just sang to her, holding her hand and telling her that we loved her and it's okay for her to go. Because I was worried that she was holding on. The last time she'd eaten was probably Saturday evening. It's the last time she had food or nutrients. It was Saturday evening, and by Thursday we were just shocked she was holding on, because most people after 3 days, they're gone. But I sang Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Amazing Grace, and Hallelujah, because those were the 4 songs that I could think of that she might like. And And I just kept telling her as I was singing to her that we loved her. It was okay for her to, it was okay for her to let go. Regardless of my personal beliefs, I know her beliefs. She wasn't afraid to die. She was ready to go home to Jesus because that's what she wanted. And the hard thing for me to get people to understand now when I'm crying now is it's not really so much that I'm sad that she's gone. Just things keep triggering me. I was using somebody's shower gel when I was taking a shower, and it smelled like the bubble bath that she used to give me a bath in when I was a kid. It made me cry. Heard Sarah McLachlan's song Angel, made me cry. So yeah, Thursday night my dad and I both stayed at the hospital. I sang to Grandma. And Friday morning at 6:54 a.m. she drew her last breath. And I was prepared to hear like a death rattle or something scary. And no, she just, it was like a sigh. She went peacefully as they can manage. As soon as that happened and I made sure my dad understood, I called Wendy and she headed to the hospital to meet us because she hadn't yet left, because this was, I don't know, like she was on her way, I think, to the hospital when I called her. I can't even remember. I don't really know how my dad was able to get it together to contact the funeral home to have them come get her. But he did that, and we went over to the funeral home to pick out her casket and all of the other stuff according to her wishes. And her favorite color was blue, so we picked out a blue casket for her. And then after we had that figured out, we had to go get flowers, so we went and picked out flowers. And then Wendy and I went to Columbus, Ohio to pick up Ray. She actually took care of switching my flight because I had originally scheduled my flight to be there from when I got in town that Monday night at midnight until Saturday. And we switched my flight to go out on the following Wednesday. And we went to go pick up Ray, and it was about a 3-hour drive there, and then it was a 4-hour drive home because my dad's like an hour west of Indianapolis. So we picked up Ray, and I was so glad to see him, so glad he was there. Just having him around made me feel so much better. Oh yeah, so I went on this trip. You know, I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I'm a medical marijuana patient in Florida. And it's not reciprocal, it's not a reciprocal thing through other states like Indiana, so I wasn't willing to fly with all of my medication. I flew with my daily anxiety meds that I take that are legal everywhere, and I had like, I think 3 Xanax XR, which normally I always plan to have 1 for every day that I'm gonna be gone on a trip if I need it, which I haven't been eating it, but that's what I normally plan. So I had 3. And I took 1 that first day that I guess I was there, and then I took 1 at the funeral, and I took 1 at the showing, just to kind of get me through things. And I hate to, it sucks going through a situation like this knowing that I have medication at home that would help me, you know, be able to get more than 2 hours of sleep or whatever, and just make things feel a little better, but didn't have it, got through it. Don't like getting through things without medication, because I wasn't drinking because I might have to drive at any given time. So yeah, Friday was such a surreal day. I couldn't believe all the things we got done Friday. Saturday we had more errands running around to do because my dad set the showing up for Monday and the funeral for Tuesday. Sunday, my dad didn't feel well and he was hospitalized at noon for internal bleeding. And so my dad had worked so hard to get everything set up for Grandma's funeral to be Tuesday and to have her showing on Monday. And he did not want to be in the hospital. He went actually over to IU West, which is where my grandmother was. They transferred him to Methodist, which is a hospital in downtown Indianapolis. And when I got there, I felt like we were in just this, I don't know, the hospital it was so different, like the differences between the two hospitals, it was a stark contrast. The downtown hospital seemed so just dirty in comparison, and the rooms were so just cramped and tight, and there were just weird, I don't know, maybe it's because it's an old facility, but I didn't like the facility. I didn't like the doctors. I did like his nurse. His nurse, Zach, was awesome and was trying to help be an advocate for him, but nobody else was. My dad kept being shuffled between different doctors who were just like, oh, well, you know, you're having internal bleeding. We can see that you're having internal bleeding, but we can't pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. Because we can't pinpoint exactly where it's coming from, we can't do anything. And it was the weekend, so they were short-staffed. So on Monday, he ended up getting transferred over to IU West, or they discharged him. I can't even remember the exact details, and for that I'm sorry, but basically I think they discharged him on Monday thinking that he would be able to at least go to Grandma's wake, which was from 4 to 8. But he was not, like, he immediately had to go back to the hospital because his internal bleeding started up again. He started feeling like crap. So he was back at IU West, and I was just like, okay, you know, Dad's not going to be able to get any resolution because he can't go to the wake and he can't go to the funeral. So when I left the hospital on Monday, I think it was around like 6 o'clock, I went by Best Buy and I bought a GoPro Hero 6 Black and stuff to go with that so that I could record my grandmother's funeral for my dad so he would get some closure, even though I didn't want to take photos or do anything at the funeral and the showing, just because that's not how I want to remember my grandma. But I did all of those things for my dad. And when I got over to the showing Monday night, I was so grateful to see my friends there because Christy and April, my best friends from high school, as well as Jason, showed up. And then their respective partners, Christy's partner Nate came and April's husband Rob came. So I was so grateful to see the 5 of them there and to hug them. And 3 of my cousins also were there that I really appreciated. Ricky and Starla and Brian, they also came to see my grandmother. So I was really grateful for that. When I was in high school, we had spent, you know, I lived with my grandmother. She was like my mother, which is part of why this is so hard for me. But we would come hang out at my grandma's house, and grandma would make, you know, snacks for us. And so everybody always had really fond memories of my grandma and my grandma's house. And so that was kind of nice to share. That was, I think, the only night. Yeah, I went out to dinner that night with my friends after the showing. I think that was the only night that, yeah, it was the only night I actually went out and did anything while I was there, just because of everything that was going on. But I only went out because my dad, they told me that my dad was doing better, and I was like, okay. Tuesday was the funeral. It was at 11 a.m. I recorded everything. I think the video turned out okay. I haven't had the constitution to edit it yet, just because I need to do it, but it's just so upsetting. And the funeral was good. One of the people that I wanted to reach out to ask to come to the funeral for my grandmother was Pastor Mike Courtney. And Pastor Mike Courtney would have been the pastor of the church when I still attended my grandmother's church, and I loved him, thought he was a great guy. And so I was glad that not only was he there, but he was somebody who spoke. One of my dad's cousins, Mark, also spoke, and then my grandmother's church's pastor spoke as well, but I really don't like that guy. So I didn't really find anything he said to be remotely entertaining or helpful. But I enjoyed listening to my cousin Mark and Mike speak. not only did we record everything on the GoPro Hero 6 Black camera, we also used my iPad and phone and stuff to FaceTime with my dad, so my dad could get as real time as possible for the experience, and that worked pretty well. After the funeral, we went to the cemetery and got to see Grandma's headstone, and we had a little ceremony there. And I think that was probably pretty hard for my niece and nephew, my brother's kids, which my brother was great through this whole thing. He was awesome, but I feel like it was really hard on his kids because they were so young, and they kind of understood what was going on and were pretty upset. After that finished, we had to go back and, like, the church put on some sort of like a dinner thing after the funeral for us. So we had to go back and like pretend to kind of eat. And basically as soon as it was socially acceptable, I left so that I could go over to the hospital with my dad. I wanted to be with my dad because I knew that he was going to be in the hospital again. Or he still was still in the hospital, hadn't been released. So we stayed at the hospital pretty much as late as my dad would let us, and then we went home. And then we got up early Wednesday morning and got to the hospital at, I think, between 7:30 and 8, so I could spend at least an hour with my dad while he was in the hospital before I left for my flight. He seemed to think that he was going to be, that the internal bleeding had stopped, and they were going to let him out of the hospital on Wednesday, which was true. In fact, he was released about the same time my flight landed in Tampa, and he's doing better now. But these past 2 weeks have been the worst 2 weeks of my life. I've been working with my therapist and mentally preparing for the moment that, you know, eventually my grandma's going to die and I need to be able to cope. And because I had such a shitty mom, you know, my grandma, basically the people who've been moms to me have been my grandma, Wendy, and Ray's mom. So 3 wonderful, wonderful women. And yeah, I knew it was going to be really hard for me to deal with losing my grandma. And it is. But I'm getting through it. I wasn't ready to lose my dad too, and I'm so glad I didn't, but I'm scared as all hell that I could lose him. The issue he had with the internal bleeding was because of he has like a condition called diverticulitis, which I didn't even know diverticulitis could be life-threatening. I didn't know it could be dangerous. I just thought it was like, oh, you have food you have to avoid. But it's apparently, I guess it can cause internal bleeding, and if they can't stop it, then you can die. So I don't know. Since people keep asking, I'm okay. I've made peace with the fact that, you know, my grandmother is gone. She had wanted to die for a long time, pretty much since my Uncle Buck died. She was lonely and missed him. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with her going out on her terms. She lived her life in her terms. A couple stories that I want to share about my grandma is that she was a breast cancer survivor. This is actually one of the reasons that I fucking hate breast cancer awareness, because there have been more than enough awareness raised. She had to have a radical mastectomy, I guess, where they basically cut everything out. And when she was going through her chemo, where chemo normally makes you very nauseous and you get sick and you lose your hair and stuff like that, like, she would get up and go to work. On her lunch break, she'd go to chemo, and then she'd go back to work afterwards. She didn't get sick. Her hair went like steel gray, but that was it. And I just had no idea she was such a badass. That, you know, the chemo didn't really affect her the way it affects your average person, because she didn't lose any of her hair. And in fact, at 95, I have to admit I was a little bit envious at just how thick her hair was, because I was sitting there petting her hair at one point, and I was just like, I can't believe your hair is still so thick. And like it was mostly still gray with some like silver in it, but not completely, like, hadn't completely lost all of its pigment yet. So anyway, that's what's been going on with me. I'm okay. I'm just sad. and it's gonna be a while before I'm not sad. I can't think about her or talk about her really without crying, which, you know, it's okay to cry. It's okay to have these emotions. I get that, but it's hard. This has been extremely, extremely stressful, and getting through tough times like this, I'm so grateful for my friends and grateful for my family. My closest friends here, which are like Mike and Eric and Kim and Jesse and Corinne and Ryan and probably Mickey and Nick, like they all checked up on me during the past couple weeks. Just, it was nice. I just couldn't believe like so many things just kept going wrong, like with the way, like I didn't mention, I forgot to mention it, but like all kinds of things just seemed to be conspiring against us having the wake and the showing when my dad wanted to have it on Monday and Tuesday. Lightning even struck the church and like fried the sound system, so they had to get a backup system so that they'd be able to have any sound working for the ceremony or the funeral and the showing. Just weird stuff. Anyway, that's what's been going on in my life. It's been intense, and I'm sure I left out details that I may want to share later, but I just wanted to update you. That's what's been going on with me. That's why like I dropped off the radar, because I left and went to Indiana and didn't come back until this past Wednesday, and I haven't felt like doing anything other than crying for since. Oh, and I know since some people are going to ask, what did I do for my 40th birthday? Yesterday was my 40th birthday, and I wasn't planning on taking an impromptu trip to Indiana, so I did nothing. I might be having friends over next Saturday. I'm not even sure, but I didn't really feel like doing anything. Didn't want to do anything, so we went out to dinner. Ray and Dave and I went out to Flamestone and had a really nice dinner, and that was great, but right now I just don't want to do much of anything at all. All right, I'll chat with you guys later. Bye.